picky and I'm a little bit of a Nazi, the why just isn't enough, right? I'm a big believer in the how. The how as in knowing how something works, right? I believe knowing how something works is important because it creates this process of trust. When you know how something works, you start to believe in it, and when you believe in it, you're more likely to continue doing it, right? So, not only today do I want to give you the why on why resistance training is beneficial, but I also want to show you guys how it works, right? So I'll give you an example. Basically, the why in this case would be knowing that resistance training causes fat loss, right? That's why we do it, because we know that it causes fat loss, yeah? That's one thing, but it's a whole nother story to understand how doing this with weights causes fat to come off my body, right? So that's what I want to give you guys today. Cool? Cool. Now, too many times I've seen clients lose motivation and sort of give up on their goals because they start to lose trust in the process, right? And it's sort of our fault as personal trainers because we don't educate them enough on how these things work, right? So they don't actually know what they're looking for, right? They lose trust, they stop doing what they're doing, and then we don't ever see them again, right? So let's get started. Resistance training, what is it? Well, basically resistance training can be defined as any sort of exercise or movement pattern where the muscle is forced to contract against an external resistance. Now that external resistance can literally be anything. Yeah? It can be free weights, preloaded weights, it can be body weight, it can be KBs, dead balls, sandbags, whatever it might be, any sort of resistance, right? So I'm going to keep it nice and simple today. We've got 4 benefits of resistance training. They're not the only benefits, they're just what I believe to be the most important. I'm going to split all of those 4 up into 2 parts, alright? So we're going to have the why, all those benefits are important, and then how those benefits work, alright? So the fat loss. Fat loss is the first benefit, it's probably the most known, it's probably the most talked about one, right? But why is it beneficial for us to lose fat? Right? Why is it important that we can't just sit around all day and just be fat asses and lazy? Why do we have to lose fat, right? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. Some of them include when we get fatter, we lose mobility and flexibility. So the ability to move freely throughout a range of motion. When we put on large amounts of fat, it's a lot harder to move freely, so we aren't living as comfortably, right? And then there's the aesthetic side of things. So when we feel as if we look bad, we start to feel bad, and then that decreases self-esteem, that decreases self-confidence, self-worth, all those sort of things. We have a poorer emotional health, right? And then there's increased risk of things like organ failures, heart disease, stress fractures, strokes, cancers. We have poorer circulatory health, so blood doesn't move as freely when we're fatter. We have decreased sexual and reproductive health, so we don't have as much success reproducing. So there's a lot of reasons, right? That's the why. Yeah, that's why we need to lose fat. Cool? But then how does this work? How does doing this with weights cause fat to come off my body? Right? So that's what I'm going to give you guys to understand. Now, the truth is that fat is the most preferred fuel type for human metabolism. Right? What that means is the body likes to use fat over any other source of fuel. Cool? The reason for that is we can get 9 calories of energy from 1 gram of fat compared to when we look to carbohydrates or protein where we can only get 4 calories of energy. So it's a lot more efficient to go to 1 gram of fat and get twice the amount of energy than it is to go to carbs. Cool? Now yes, it is true that the body will look to carbs first as a source of energy, but that doesn't last very long. We need carbs to fuel the brain, and we need carbs backed up in case of an emergency, right? Carbs are a very quick fuel source, so we need to save those carbs if we ever need to get out of danger in an emergency, right? The body's actually also really poor at storing carbs. We're not that efficient at storing carbs. We can't store that many, right? We have an unlimited capacity to store fat. We're really good at storing fat, right? Because it's that preferred fuel type, so we're really good at storing it, right? So, the way in which it works, and I'll give you guys a little bit of a picture. Basically, you've got your fat cell, or an adipocyte is what it's called. Adipocyte is made up of 3 fatty acid molecules, right? Those fatty acid molecules bind together by a molecule called glycerol, and that makes up your adipocyte, right? So this is what fat looks like. This is fat, yeah? This is the stuff that we all hate, alright?
Smiley face.
Yeah.
Love it.
Little smiley face. Or like a shocked face.
Yeah.
So, when we start to work, the muscles call on the brain for energy. They start to use carbs, and then the brain goes, wait, I actually need these carbs to fuel the brain, and I actually need these in case of an emergency. Right? So then it starts to look to fat. So, how do we get this off the body? Well, in very simple terms, what happens is, this fatty acid, or this adipocyte, is transported through the bloodstream into the muscles, where it can do one of two things. It can be either stored for later, when we need to use it for long periods of exercise, or it's oxidized and it's transformed into ATP. ATP just stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's literally just a scientific word for energy. So, in simple terms, we transport this fat through the bloodstream into the muscles. It's oxidized, it's broken down, and it's turned into energy. Right? So, you're literally using that fat as energy. Cool? That's how it works. Right? Now, that's pretty cool because that's the energy that we use while we're training. That's the fuel source that we go to while we're training. But that's not where resistance training is so valuable. Now, resistance training becomes really valuable in a thing called EPOC. So EPOC, spelled EPOC, stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Right? What happens in this molecular pathway where we turn fats into energy, we need oxygen for that to happen. Right? So, constantly while we're working out, we're using close to all of the oxygen stores within our body to turn this fat into energy, right? In doing so, we use up all of the oxygen stores. So, after we've had our session, we've used up close to all of our oxygen stores. We go home, we sit on the couch, we cook dinner, we relax, whatever it is we do, and our body continues to work to refuel that oxygen store, right? In doing so, it burns calories. So, when we refuel those oxygen stores, we're burning calories, right? That EPOC effect has been shown to last up to 38 hours after resistance training. So, you do a resistance session, not only are you burning the calories that you used to fuel that session, but for 38 hours after that session, your body's continuously burning calories so it can reproduce those oxygen stores, right? Now, the last thing that affects our fat loss when we do resistance training is growth hormone. So, growth hormone is a potent fat loss hormone. Basically, growth hormone is what fuels this molecular pathway. This molecular pathway is called glycolysis. So, growth hormone starts this pathway for fat to be turned into energy. What that means is, the more growth hormone that we have inside our body, the more this fat is burned and turned into energy, right? We see a huge jump in growth hormone for close to 33 hours after resistance training. So, both this EPOC and growth hormone effect are working together for almost a day and a half after your resistance training, and we're continuing to burn calories, yeah? You come back to the gym within 24 hours and you repeat that cycle again, so it keeps on turning over, it keeps on turning over. Cool? So that's how we burn fat, that's how it works, right? The second benefit is hypertrophy. Now, hypertrophy is just a scientific word for building muscle, or the increase in size of a muscle cell. Now, it's important to know that we can't increase the number of cells within a muscle, we can only increase their size. So we're born with a certain amount of muscle cells. We can't increase the number of cells, we can only increase their size. Right? So what happens, in very simple terms, we come to the gym, we cause these things called micro tears within the muscle fibre. We go home, and as long as there's adequate recovery and rest, those micro tears within the muscle fibre repair, but when they repair bigger. Over time, when we repeat this cycle, tearing the muscle fibre, rebuilding it bigger, tearing it, and our muscles start to get bigger, right? But why is this important? Why do we need bigger muscles? Why is it sort of considered good to have bigger muscles?
Increases your metabolism.
Definitely. That's the biggest one. That's what I want to talk about the most today. Now, the other couple of things that are important and a lot of people like as well is the aesthetic side of things, right? So once again, when we feel as if we look good, we start to feel good, and then we enjoy life more. Then there's functional strength. Now, hoping on the type of training that you're doing, when you increase your muscle size, you increase functional strength as well. Functional strength is just the strength that we need to get through everyday life, right? Walking up a flight of stairs, getting the groceries out of the car, whatever it might be, loading up the car, that's functional strength. We increase muscle size, hopefully our functional strength can increase as well. There's also injury prevention. When you increase the size of the muscle, you increase the connective tissue that's connected to the muscle as well, right? Our connective tissue holds us together. It pulls the skeletal muscle system all in one, right? So it holds us together. If you've got stronger connective tissue, you're going to be less likely to be injured. Right? Exactly. So all those benefits. Now the biggest one is the increased BMR. So BMR stands for basal metabolic rate, and that's our metabolism, right? So how does increasing my muscle size increase my metabolism, right? Does anyone know what BMR really is? Or what your metabolism really is? Okay. So your metabolism is the amount of energy expenditure or the amount of energy that you use while at rest. So to do nothing, standing here, I'm using energy just to stand here, right? It's the amount of calories you use per day to do nothing before you start to exercise, right? If you increase the size of your muscle, the amount of energy we use throughout the day starts to increase. We burn more calories, we lose more fat, right? So, how does increasing my size of my muscle increase my BMR? Well, muscle tissue is something what we call active tissue, right? So adipose tissue, or this fat cell, is what we call inactive tissue. To sit on our body, it literally takes no energy to sit there. It'll sit there until you give it a reason to be burned as energy, right? It doesn't cost anything to sit there. Muscle, on the other hand, costs energy to sit there. So for us, just to maintain our muscle, we need to use energy, otherwise it'll start to atrophy and it'll start to decay, right? It's an active tissue. So 1 kilogram of muscle can use anywhere between 20 to 40 calories per day of energy, right? So to put that in perspective, for an average male who has like 40 kilos of muscle, they're burning 800 calories a day before they even move, just so that muscle doesn't atrophy, right? So you can see, if you put on another kilo of muscle, you're putting on that extra 40 calories, right? And you're burning that extra fat, right? So, more muscle equals increased metabolism, or BMR, equals more fat loss. Nice and simple. Cool? The third one is enhanced mood. Now I think this is one of the most underrated ones, and I think this is my most important one, right? Enhanced mood. Has anyone ever heard of serotonin? Yeah? It's good stuff, isn't it? No. Serotonin is a feel-good hormone. Well, actually, it's not technically a hormone, it's a neurotransmitter, but serotonin is the stuff in our body that makes us feel good, it makes us feel happy, right? Resistance training has been shown to improve serotonin levels for up to 24 hours after a resistance session, right? Not only does it increase the production of serotonin in the brain, but it also increases the rate at which it's released, right? So resistance training equals that production of serotonin and that release, and then we're feeling better as well, right? Now, the more motor activity that you use while we're doing resistance training, more muscles that are used, the more serotonin released. That's why resistance training is quite good, because you use a lot of the muscles. Cool? The other one's endorphins. So, anyone heard of endorphins? Endorphins are a large group of hormones. I think there's 20 endorphins, 20 different hormones in a group of endorphins, and they also give off this feel-good feeling in the body, right? It's actually very similar to the same feeling as morphine, endorphins, right? So, post-exercise, it has been proven that we can increase endorphin levels by up to 4 times. There was a study that was performed in like the early 2000s, and it had elite level female powerlifters, and it tested their endorphin levels after a big weightlifting session, and then it tested their endorphins again after they had a week of rest. Their endorphin levels were 4 times that of after they had rest, right? This can last up to 24 hours as well, endorphin levels, up to 4 times, that's massive. So, if you're training once a day, every 24 hours, you have that constant influx of endorphins and you're constantly feeling good, whereas when you stop to train, you stop getting that influx of endorphins, yeah? The last one is cortisol. So, does anyone know what cortisol does or what it's responsible for? Cortisol is a steroid hormone. So it's released by the adrenal gland, and it's released in response to fear or stress, right? It's part of the fight or flight mechanism. So we need cortisol in parts when we need to either fight or flight, yeah, in danger, right? What happens when we release cortisol, but then we don't give the body this fight or flight mechanism? It builds up inside the body and it starts to wreak havoc on both the body and the mind, right? So a good example to give you an idea of when we build up cortisol is like when you're stressing out about something, but you're not doing anything to solve the problem, right? You're not giving the body that fight or flight response for it to use the cortisol. So you might have an assignment during the week, start stressing out about it, but you leave it till the last minute. Procrastinate, it builds up, and then you don't give anything to release it, right? Resistance training replicates this fight or flight response, right? The body thinks resistance training is this fight mechanism. It thinks it's a fight mechanism. So it uses cortisol to get through that fight response, right? When we build up cortisol and we do resistance training, it uses up the cortisol, right? So imagine if I told you I knew a way where I can increase serotonin, increase endorphins, and decrease cortisol with no known side effects. I do. It's called resistance training. Yeah? Crazy, right? So, enhanced mood, the last one is increased bone density. So, as we get older, our bones start to decay. It's a part of life. It's called osteoporosis, right? Increased bone density resistance training has been proven time and time again to have a positive direct relationship with increased bone density. There's been over like 50 studies within the last 10 years that prove that resistance training will increase your bone density. What that means is it's not a matter of question anymore, it's 100%. They didn't used to know, but now they're 100% sure that doing resistance training will increase your bone density, right? So why is this important? Why do we need to increase our bone density? Well, like I said, osteoporosis. As we get older, our bones start to decay, we start to get brittle, and then that puts us in a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort, but it also puts us at high risk of fractures and broken bones. Yeah? When we get older, some of these fractures and broken bones can be quite difficult to overcome, especially when they're in places like the hip and the femur, right? So it puts us at a large disadvantage and it puts us in a lot of discomfort later on in life, right? If we focus on building stronger bones now, not only are our bones less likely to decay later on in life, but we're also less likely to be affected by it in the earlier stages of life, right? So we focus on putting on the dense bones now, then we don't have to deal with that sort of stuff later on in life, right? So that's why we need to increase bone density. Now the way it works, in very simple terms, resistance training enhances bone structure by aiding in the production of protein molecules. So when we train, we increase protein molecules. These protein molecules are then mineralized as calcium phosphates on the outer surface of the bone. So, more resistance training, more protein molecules, and then these protein molecules are calcified on the outer surface on the bone, and they're placed on there and they make our bones stronger. Later on in life, we don't have to worry as much about that osteoporosis. Cool? They're the four main ones. I mean, it's very important to understand that that's not the only four benefits. They're just the ones that I think are most important. Cool? Any questions?
So say with my parents,
Yep.
if they're already at that age where they're getting osteoporosis and stuff, can you repair it at that age?
Yes, but not as effective, not as quickly as you could when you were younger.
So they
right?
still do...
You can't stop.
Yeah.
You can't stop it happening,
Yeah.
but you can prolong it, right? So someone who has never participated in resistance style training their whole life,
Yeah.
they're going to get it a lot earlier and they're going to get it a lot more brutally, a lot more quicker it's going to happen, right? Compared to someone who has been doing resistance style training their whole life, build up their bone density, and then they're not as affected, or not as affected as soon. It'll still always happen. You can't stop it from happening, but you can prolong it,
Yeah.
and the effects as well.
Starting from now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else? That's it? That either means I'm really
That's
good
it.
at
No,
explaining stuff, or you guys will stop
one.
listening.
Too
To it. That's all right.
So with the grams of fat and whatever.
Yeah.
So say if you had one big meal of Macca's instead of 2 lots of steak and veg, what's the difference?
So that's when we go into simple carbs.
Like for me trying to put on weight, why don't I just go and eat like a fatty?
Well, that goes into simple carbs, it's different types of carbohydrates. That's where it gets quite complex, right? The molecular pathway is very different, right? Basically, it's your fuel source. So you'll burn up those calories a lot quicker than you would from wholesome foods like steak and veggies, right? So instead of storing that where you need it for this hypertrophy to occur, you'll just use it as energy really quickly, right? Or because it's that sort of slow digesting, it'll be stored on the adipocytes for later and you won't be able to use it as fuel. So it'll just be stored as fat.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, sounds good.
So basically, we got to give the body a reason to use fat. It's not actually that hard. They used to think it was a lot harder. You might have heard of people doing low intensity, long distance training for fat loss. They would just walk and they would say, I'm only burning fats. Recent years have shown that that's not actually true. It goes to fats quite quickly. It uses carbs for like 3 minutes. If you exercise for more than 3 minutes, it'll start to bite into the fat stores, right? We need to save carbs for the brain and we need to save carbs in case of an emergency. Cool?
So if you're doing something like this, like say walking on the treadmill or something like that, these SPOC and that
don't happen.
It just doesn't happen at all. Okay, so
and that's where
what you do when
exactly,
you
yeah.
Okay.
As soon as if you're doing a low intensity, long distance bout, the second you jump off that treadmill, that workout's done, right? So you don't get this influx for the next day and a half of EPOC and growth hormone. Same with high intensity interval training, like cardio but high intensity, right? That's why, in my opinion, low intensity, long distance training is literally pointless, right? If someone told me that they wanted to lose fat, I would never ever tell them to go for a run over 15 minutes, right? Because you do about the same amount of work as you would in a 15-minute high intensity bout, but you don't get this effect for the next 38 hours, right? It's literally pointless. And that sort of takes back to how we were sort of trained as kids. If you ever played sport as kids, you're always told to run, right? That's how you're going to become the best athlete, right? When you're a kid, that's when all of your muscle fibers are sort of sensitive to change and they sort of go into that area, right? So we sort of ruined ourselves by continuously running. We weren't getting this effect, right? Because we were told to run. When you do high intensity bouts, it's a lot more effective than what it is when you do that low intensity stuff, right? That's a good question. Always choose high intensity interval training and resistance training over low intensity long distance stuff. If someone tells you that to tap into your fat stores, you have to do low intensity long distance stuff, tell them to shut up. Alright?
That's on the record.
Yeah. Anything else? That's it? Alright, cool. What we'll do is we'll give you guys... Oh no, we got Susie, don't we?
No,
No?
no Susie today. She did prepare her rice pudding or rice oats,
Yeah.
but never was. I brought the pan, thinking we were making pancakes. So we haven't got bowls, we haven't got spoons. So we're going to get her to write that up, and then I can show you it, and you can have a look at it and smell it and see it and how it prepares and how it comes out. She said it's pretty basic, so you can sort of compare apples with apples. I know I made the cheesecake the other day, and there's a few things that I needed to change.
Yeah, she told me.
Yeah. Has anyone else made the cheesecake?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. What did you think?
Oh, it did not turn out like.
Yeah.
But it was still pretty good. My boyfriend liked it. I added an extra scoop of protein.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it was different.
Yeah.
I don't know
Did
if
you
it
use
was
vanilla? Yeah. See, I use vanilla
You
as
did
well.
too, yeah, because I was like, oh, this is shit. It doesn't look like
Yeah.
her.
So if you are going to make it, chocolate is a suggested one, or do vanilla in the base and chocolate on the top.
Yeah.
In the ingredients it says 3/4 of something of Nutella. It's actually 3/4 of a cup. So be mindful that it's 3/4 of a cup, not a teaspoon, tablespoon, stuff like that. When it says 10 drops of the stevia and the liquid sweetener, it literally means 10 drops. Don't do a squirt because it becomes real sweet. And then with the icing, I found make sure you put in a NutriBullet or something like that.
Yeah,
that
because
really
the cottage
blend it
cheese
right
is
up.
chunky as
Yeah.
well.
The
The
dry
dry stuff.
Yeah, so I just did it in KitchenAid, and there was still small clumps of
Chunky.
Yeah.
Right?
Alright,
Done. Too
a
easy.
couple minutes and then we'll set this food.